And we're live. We are live with episode 34. This is the season 1 finale of a podcast for all seasons. Eric Joseph, as my co-host with the most, is with us as always. I'm pretty excited, Eric. We're going to make some pretty big announcements tonight. We're going to talk some pretty cool TV show stuff. Why don't you start us off? Contain your excitement, because mine is palatable, and start us off and let us know what's going on.
Hi everybody, this is Eric Joseph of DarkKnightNews.com, I don't write for that. DarkKnightNews.com, DCComicsNews.com, and Multiverse Entertainment. I was almost living in the past for a moment.
Yeah, there you go, get it right.
Thinking of a site I wrote for in Days of Future Past.
That's right.
So as Josh alluded, we have a big announcement concerning the show. A little bit of a change-up. No, we are not going away. If we were, this episode would be titled Series Finale. No, it's Season 1 Finale. And it's like, hey, you guys never said you were doing this by seasons. Well, in a way, we never intended to number by seasons like some podcasts do. We were originally just going to go forward. But the reason we're doing this is I've talked things over with the rest of management over at Dark Knight News and DC Comics News, and starting with our next episode, because we wanted to make the announcement in one episode before just diving right in, we're going to start cross-posting this show on Dark Knight News and DC Comics News. We'll still keep it on the Multiverse Entertainment blog like we always have, but it opens us up to a broader audience, which is what we want. We've had some people say to us, we like your show and what you guys have to say. You guys have a real passion. You deserve more fans, and this is a chance for us to do that. Granted, we had our first few episodes on Comic Book Movie, but let's just say I didn't want it on that site for reasons of my own anymore. Plus, we weren't exactly going to get front page promotion there anyway. But I've been at DKN for about a year now, and I've been an editor at DCN since the fall, and just started contributing articles here and there. So it seems like a good fit. We're entering a new era on that site, and we want to grow, and having more multimedia on that site is certainly a boon to it. The show won't be expected to change too much, but for the fact that we're on DC-centric sites means that we're going to focus more on DC-related stuff, which isn't too much of a bad thing since Josh and I both prefer DC Comics. We'll still touch on Marvel movies here and there. We'll talk video games, James Bond, but as more so our secondary topics in an episode. But our major topics at the top of the show will always cover DC, and fans of this show do know that we like to cover at least a few things in each episode if we can. We have been talking to a few guests about appearing on the show, and in a way we've been doing the show for about a year now, so it's a decent time to launch a second season as well. And it's another reason for the renumbering was the fact that if we just went on DKN and DCN with episode 35, that seems intimidating to new listeners to just jump right in, because while this isn't a serialized primetime show, a lot of people, when they get into podcasts, they like to play catch up, as it were, and go back and listen to old ones. So starting at an episode 1, you can jump right in, and we like to give people the option to go back and listen to our older episodes. But it's like we were talking a week ago with Marvel, constantly putting out the number ones to be friendly to new readers. This is us being friendly to new listeners. So I'll reiterate some of these points in our next episode, of course, for new listeners. But Josh, anything you'd like to add about these developments before we talk comic book TV shows?
No, not really. I'm pretty excited. Obviously, we do this as, it's a passion project. We do it for fun. We're not making money off of it. We're not doing it with the expectation of becoming YouTube superstars. Although all of those things would be awesome, frankly. I hope that the things that we say are things that people want to hear, and we talk about things that interest people, specifically people who like comic books. Although we've opened up our horizons. We've opened up our horizons a little bit here and there. As far as some of the things that we cover, like Eric said, James Bond's a big passion for both of us. Video games, obviously, and often a lot of those topics, pop culture things, tend to go hand in hand, as is evidenced by extremely popular things like the San Diego Comic-Con. That being said, though. I'm a big DC guy, and so I'm excited to go on a couple of these DC-centric sites. Obviously, I'm fully aware of Eric's affiliations with these and have been for some time, and I also am a patron of those sites. I submit my clicks just like everybody else. I visit those sites regularly, and I encourage everybody who does listen to this podcast to get out there and check a lot of them out. There's so many good sites out there. They got a lot of resources. That being said, though, you'll be able to catch our podcast there now, so that's going to be pretty cool cross promotion for us. I will say that I'm not certain. We haven't nailed down the formula, and I don't want to I don't want to cross words with what Eric had already said. But if we ended up doing any Marvel-centric stuff, we're not sure if that's going to continue to post on that site for maybe an episode or whatnot. But we haven't made our final decisions on how we're going to do all of those things, but we will obviously let you know as those developments happen. But super excited about it. It's going to be a nice little change. Hopefully we get a lot more fans, and hopefully all of you who have listened to us since day one will continue to listen to us on those sites as well. And of course, we're always going to be available with links on our Facebook page as well as our blog page. So, Eric, what do you want to talk about? Our first topic. There's some pretty cool developments going on right now.
Well, I'll also say that you can probably expect guests from DKN and DCN staffers from time to time, and hopefully putting the show on these sites will allow for guests with more notoriety to come on too, because while we've had indie artists or a lesser known actress or a singer of an up and coming band, hopefully we can get people that are bigger in the comic book industry within the next year as well. But
yeah, we're always excited to have guests, so I'm looking forward to the opportunities that's going to provide cross-promoting with them. So.
And our first topic that we want to get into is we kind of left it up in there, even though we didn't mention it by name at the end of our last episode, Supergirl. And luckily, as fortune tends to have it, whenever we talk about something on this show, big news concerning it tends to break before we go on air.
Say that like it's a bad thing. It's awesome.
Another member has joined the Supergirl cast, but first we will talk Supergirl herself. Last week, Melissa Benoist, I don't know if that's how you say it, Benoist, I don't know. But
maybe it's a silent S. Maybe it's just Benoit with an ST. Hopefully we're not hacking your name up too bad, Melissa.
Because we know you're listening.
Yes, exactly. We assume you're
listening. Yeah, she's cast as Supergirl / Kara, the star of the show that will air on CBS. Hopefully this fall. Pilot shooting season is fast approaching. They usually shoot those late winter, early spring. And then if it's good enough, it gets picked up. The fact that Greg Berlanti of Arrow and The Flash fame is a producer on it certainly allows us to put some blind faith into the project. We talked about the show a bit when it was announced, but not too much is known about it. But today the announcement came that Jimmy Olsen has been cast. I hope I don't butcher this man's first name, as we may have butchered the lead's last name, but Makad Brooks, or Makad Brooks, he's our new Jimmy Olsen. We I believe he's of True Blood fame. We've still yet to cast the others that will round out the principal cast of the show. We still have Cat Grant, Winslow Schott, aka Toyman, and Hank Henshaw, aka Cyborg Superman. I'm kind of guessing Hank Henshaw is going to be introduced, and they're going to develop him into Cyborg Superman as the show goes on. But it seems like she might still exist in a world with Superman, because word was that the scripts they used for the auditions mentioned Superman, but obviously it seems Jimmy Olsen, for an undefined reason, or at least a mysterious reason, is working at Cat Grant's company and not the Daily Planet. So I'm wondering if they're going to find out a crafty way to work this into some kind of, probably its own Superman continuity, but I figure that they want to have some familiar members from that Superman universe for this, and Supergirl and Jimmy Olsen certainly have some history in comic books. The Supergirl movie from the 80s, and the animated series, a little bit on Smallville, so it's a natural fit for the character, but it opens the show up to great possibilities. I think it has the chance of being a good sci-fi superhero show. We just have the trepidation that with it being on a bigger network, that network execs will put their grubby mitts into it, whereas the CW seems to have more creative freedom. But the fact that Greg Berlanti, a well-known producer and lifelong fan of comic books, is involved in the project certainly does give us this glimmer of hope. So I'm wearing a Man of Steel hoodie as we record this, as Josh was jealous of my threads before we went on. And Josh, you're a big Superman fan, so let us know what you think of this Supergirl news.
Well, I mean, I'm always happy to hear pretty much anything Superman-centric, and when we first started hearing about the Supergirl show, we were both pretty excited about it, and as we have been about several superhero shows recently, another of which we will be talking about shortly, but we specifically had some thoughts as to how all of these recent DC properties are going to all tie in to one another, or if they were going to tie into one another, and whatnot. And the fact that this Supergirl is going to be on CBS, there was first for me the initial excitement of it going to be a show, it going to be on CBS and on the air in general, instead of being in kind of a limbo development a la the Wonder Woman show that originally was supposed to be on, I forget which network it was at the time.
The David E. Kelly one was going to be on NBC. That's the one that, with Adrienne Palicki, the one that luckily got canned, and then they were going to do one on the CW it was called Amazon, and that was actually going to be produced by someone who actually wrote Wonder Woman comics, so that had hope. But then
there's been so much development hell.
Probably because Wonder Woman being on the big screen probably had something to do with derailing that series. But before you continue, I just wanted to say there was an interesting point brought up, I think, by Krypton site about how Superman doesn't seem to stay off. Joking on my words here, doesn't seem to stay off TV for too long. There have been various series, and obviously there was a big gap between George Reeves' Adventures of Superman and then Superboy in the late 80s and early 90s. But then, right after Superboy went off the air, Lois and Clark came on. 4 years later came Smallville. 4 years later, after Smallville ends, Supergirl comes along. So, yeah, this universe doesn't stay at rest for too long in live action.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a great thing about being a Superman fan. If you enjoy some of the TV properties, not all of them have been perfect gems. I mean, the Superboy show from the 80s obviously is, high camp, and its production quality wasn't spectacular, but fans enjoyed it. It was true to the roots of what Superman was, and even people didn't care for Smallville's unique interpretation of Superman and whatnot. Lois and Clark had its naysayers, obviously, for several reasons. Some of that camp factor, putting the emphasis on romance. You can go on and on. But the interesting thing about this one is it's Supergirl alone. Yeah, is Superman going to be in the cast? I've never seen this actress Melissa Benoist in anything. I know that she was in Glee, the show Glee. She was also recently in a movie, Whiplash, which was getting some notoriety by the Academy Awards. I know for at least a few things. I don't believe that she was nominated for anything, but I know that J.K. Simmons was in that, and he got nominated for, I believe, a supporting actor role in that film. But she obviously is a talented actress. They chose her amongst what I could only imagine was a gigantic pool of casting possibilities, and the fact that she's in a Academy Award nominated film would indicate to me that she probably has some pretty good acting chops. Plus, she's pretty to look at. Obviously that's gonna be a casting possibility for Supergirl. But Mehcad Brooks, I've seen him in True Blood. It's an interesting choice. They recast Perry White as an African American in Man of Steel in Lawrence Fishburne, one of my favorite actors. And I was really excited that if they're going to recast it as against type, as it were, some people were very upset that they decided not to cast a white actor and whatnot. And if you're going to cast someone who's not the same race as the original character was in the comic books or from its original source material, the only request I have is that the actor be have the chops, and really that goes for all casting. But Mehcad Brooks, yeah, I've seen him on True Blood. He didn't blow me away on that show, but he was a little bit of a kind of a throwaway character. So it's not one of those things where I know a ton about him. I haven't seen him in a lot other than that. But the entire premise of the show is looking to shape up to be something interesting. We'll see if there's any possibility. I mean, it sounds like we're getting some information from Berlanti and others that it's probably not going to tie into some of the other shows, but that doesn't necessarily rule it out, as things tend to change on these shows. No tights, no flights. Well, they stuck to that rule pretty good on Smallville, but the no powers rule on Arrow, that didn't last extremely long, and its extreme groundedness didn't go more than a couple seasons. Just as things tend to change in development. So who knows what's going to happen here, but like Eric said, Jimmy Olsen, he's had a long and storied history with the character of Supergirl, even as a romantic interest. So that's going to be a pretty exciting thing to see, that they're going to change things up a little bit in this show. But Eric, what's the next topic? We're going to move on to the next show that we were going to mention, or do you have anything more to say about Supergirl?
I think we should ask the hard-hitting question. Is she going to go blonde for it? Because we think Supergirl is a blonde, but Grant Gustin is the Flash, and Stephen Amell is Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow. Those are both characters who were blonde in the comics, and they cast brunette guys to play them.
Right.
And they did not dye their hair. So
that is a hard-hitting question, indeed. Yeah, no, actually, that is kind of funny. Yeah, she is a pretty dark-haired brunette. So, we also have the possibility of, if anyone knows Supergirl history, Linda Danvers is her alter ego often, and she wears a brunette wig in order to hide her identity as Supergirl.
I,
So,
I think that she might be going by the identity of Kara Danvers on this show. I'm pretty sure the Danvers name has been thrown around.
well, it definitely the fact that they decided to cast a brunette could be an indication that maybe that's the way that they plan to go. So who knows? Anyway, it's
Now, I think I'm not familiar with her, but you seem to have maybe seen her in some things, but that's fine. I wasn't familiar with Stephen Amell because I ain't watched the. Well, I've seen some Vampire Diaries, and I never want to see it again. But um, it's let roles like this launch a young actor's career. It's one time someone on Facebook made this really stupid comment. I thought it was they won't watch comic book TV shows because they don't feature A-list actors in them. And that's, first of all, of course, you're not going to get, Tom Hanks in a show on the CW, but at the same time, that's kind of like a slap in the face to these actors who really do a good job. It denies the charm of Grant Gustin or others like him, or
how about those fantastic acting chops of Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor in
yeah, or
Smallville?
or the thespian Sam Witwer.
Yeah, Sam Witwer's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. Just because you may not be an Oscar winner or have a $1 billion blockbuster under your belt doesn't mean that you're an actor who doesn't deserve someone's attention.
Sure.
That's not like to say there aren't amazing singers who never get record contracts.
Right. Also, that statement is kind of idiotic at this point in the date, or this point in the game, simply because TV is really where it's at right now. A lot of popular actors, and A-list, or at the very least B-list actors, are starting to go to TV. I mean, you have Kevin Spacey's on House of Cards, which is, granted it's a Netflix exclusive show, but it's TV. You have Gary Sinise, Lawrence Fishburne's on Hannibal. I mean, I could
Yeah,
go on,
binge
but
watching is the thing now.
well, it's people they want to bring, they want some. I think it's part of it's probably these guys want a little bit more of an open role, or a standard job versus being unemployed for months at a time, as typically is the case in only acting in films. But that's neither here nor there. I think we should move on to topic number 2, which is going to be another TV show that we recently had announced. Eric, you want to start us off on that topic?
Yes, it's not totally 100% yet, but looks like Fox is going to do an X-Men TV show.
Kaboom!
What's interesting is that Fox will now be the network that will have DC and Marvel shows on it, because of course they have Gotham, and then they have Lucifer in development, a DC/Vertigo property. So now we get into X-Men, of course, Fox Studios with the live action rights to the X-Men. Not much is known about the show other than it seems to be produced by some folks who worked on 24, such as Manny Koto, and it won't air any earlier than fall 2016, but it leaves it open to a lot of speculation. Do these guys read comic books? Can we put faith in the project, even though 24 was such a highly successful series? What characters can they use? Are we going to keep it separate from the movie universe? Are we going to see TV casts of Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean Grey? The likes of that, maybe others, Professor Xavier? Or are we going to exist in the same universe as the movies and maybe take someone who maybe has had a small role, maybe have Quicksilver or somebody play a big role on the TV show? Are we going to use characters who aren't as prominent and just build from there, because I believe we've said before on the show a long time ago, if you own any one Marvel property that's really going to let you cash in and have depth, it's the X-Men, because it's a universe unto itself, such a deep roster and such a rich history in that franchise alone. There's so much you can do with the X-Men, and I don't think that the series is beyond hope, just because even if they can't use Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean Grey, maybe Storm, or the big guns, but there are a lot they haven't used, and there's certainly a lot of villains they haven't used because the movies keep going to the Magneto well and stuff. But Mr. Sinister, though I won't doubt if Mr. Sinister's in the Apocalypse movie because he has ties to that character. But if they don't use him, Mr. Sinister would be a fine villain to use on the TV show. And then it also, just because they say X-Men, it could still be X-Men Universe. So it seems that the X-Force movie doesn't seem to be happening. Who knows? It still could. We still have that Mystery 2018 movie hanging over our heads, but I'm guessing X-Force is dead. They could use that for the TV show. There's X Factor, but Fox already had a show called X Factor of a very different subject matter. But who knows? They could just make it an X Factor show, call it X-Men to get viewers to turn out in droves. There's certainly a lot of possibilities, and there's a lot to think about between now and fall of 2016. So let's hear some of your speculation on the subject, Josh.
Well, I'm a big X-Men fan. I have been since I was a kid. I collected some of the comics when I was that age. More some of the really 90s stuff like New Mutants and things like that.
That was an incredible era to grow up in as an X-Men fan.
Yeah, it was like every week there was like new X-Men stuff going on, and they had the animated series and whatnot, which I liked and Eric thinks is horrible.
I won't deny its place in history, though. It was drawn well, but the animation wasn't that great. And while it
Listen, everything looks better through nostalgia-colored glasses, Eric.
Yeah, it's not Batman the Animated Series. I'll say that.
It's not the Bruce Timm properties at all.
Seriously, I'll be the one to say this. The voice acting and dialogue on the show were bad. No, storytelling and dialogue writing are two different things. But take off your nostalgia goggles, or maybe that has something to put over your ears too. But
everyone knows that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was also the best cartoon ever made, and so was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was the best action show, of course.
Yeah, the voice acting in the X-Men animated series from the 90s is on par with the original Resident Evil game.
Yeah, well, anyway, before we get too far on an aside,
yeah, it has its place.
It's definitely. Yeah, it was definitely a nostalgic show, but I love the X-Men, and they have this gigantic cast, and yet they've had several major characters in the continuity of the films, especially if you get into, say, the third X-Men film, which has been thankfully stricken from the record. Voila, the retcon, and it had a really deep roster. It was getting into some of the really B and C class characters, and now we're getting characters like Emma Frost and Quicksilver in the modern continuity. But they have like a really just enormous list of characters that to go to the well for, and the large portion of them haven't been touched. I mean, just a few that come to mind, like Psylocke. She's a very popular female character, and a female character. I mean, they're always trying to do the whole female empowerment thing nowadays. They always want the shows to skew towards women as well. So it's very, very likely that they could have a character like Jubilee. She was in the original animated cartoon. Granted, they've kind of used parts of her character for the purposes of other continuity, and kind of gave some of her stuff to other characters. But I could think of a few other characters. They've done Banshee. They did Blink, I know, in Bishop in the recent movie. They've done Havoc, but some of those characters are kind of B characters. Cable's one that comes to mind. Obviously, he hasn't been in any of the recent movies. They touched on Archangel, who's an awesome character, and they did him for basically this really short stint. So I could see them developing a really good series. For me, it's all about tone. The X Factor show, or Mutant X rather, the Mutant X show from the I believe it was the early 90s.
Early 2000s.
Was it the early 2000s? Gosh, we are so old. It seems much longer ago. But that being said, it's one of those shows that it was trying to hit a certain tone. It was trying to do the whole teen angst thing during the 90s. It was moderately successful at doing those things. It just wasn't that good at juggling that plus superpowers, and the inability to have these really big characters from the comics, the most popular characters. But it's all about the writing. I think that if you have a show that's really well written, well directed, you set the tone properly, you don't make it necessarily pure seriousness of The Watchmen, but you don't make it the pure comedy romp of Iron Man 3's slapstick comedy, and I think that you have a fairly winning product. I mean, Fox had the fact that they own the rights and it's their own property means that they're going to want it to succeed. And the shows that have been on Fox for a really long period of time are things that Fox really wanted to succeed. Bones is one that comes to mind. It's a show that kind of like defies logic that it's been on for something like almost 10 seasons.
It is in its 10th year.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It is in its 10th year.
Oh, it is in its 10th year? Okay, yeah. I mean, I think it's an okay show, but I really just think it's an okay show. And
I stopped watching.
I watched a couple seasons, and it's just one of those things where I think that it is it's one of those shows that it has a lot of promise, and it just didn't have the hook for me. It needs to have a hook, and it didn't seem to have the type of hook that I wanted out of a procedural. But that being said, X-Men, I think that it's going to be interesting. Will it have any continuity tie-in to the movies? I would say it's unlikely that that's the case. That's not to say that it couldn't and tell B stories, but I think that then you'd be getting into some very Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. territory where it's like, okay, we don't give a shit what happens to these characters. Can you just bring in the characters from the movies that we know and love? If they quickly establish that this was maybe a different period of time, when these major characters were not around, if they decided to do something like a modern telling, instead of a kind of a new class, which takes place in the 60s, 70s, then I think that they'd have the ability to tell unique stories with kind of saying like, oh yeah, those characters don't, or throwing them in as Easter eggs. Oh yeah, Professor Logan. Yeah, don't get him angry. Or that guy always smells like cigars or something like that. They can throw in Easter eggs and jabs to major characters in any number of ways, which could work really well, or it could make people go, yeah, why aren't those characters here? Because your jokes are horrible. So
we could have the thing like we joked about when Lex wasn't going to be on the latter seasons of Smallville. We could have Nightcrawler, a character hasn't been used in the movies. Maybe they could use him in the TV show, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll say Nightcrawler. He's yelling at someone off screen. Yeah, that's right, Logan. Just stand there. Your silence says more than words ever could.
Right. Yeah, it's just the constant off-screen acting of Professor. Yeah, did you see Professor X? No, he just left. Yeah, we also get into that possibility when we start talking Supergirl's potential Superman mentions, at one point or another, it's going to be the elephant of the room. Where is Superman? And unless they decide to go the route where she is much older than Superman, which has almost never been done in continuity, not in my recollection, and I'm a pretty big Superman aficionado. So, not to my knowledge, has Supergirl really ever been older than Superman? Physiologically, chronologically, she's older than Superman because she was born before him, and then usually stuck on pieces of Krypton or Argo or any other number of interpretations of her origin story, and then came to Earth at a much later time, and for some reason was younger physiologically than Superman was, a teenage girl typically. So I can't imagine they're going to make the situation where she's older than Superman, and that and Jimmy Olsen and all of his villains wouldn't work out. So yeah, who knows? But X-Men, Eric, what do you think? Do you think it's going to potentially be a good product if they finally end up going through with it? Do you think that it has the potential to be great?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I think we should ponder is that with the show coming in fall 2016 and Apocalypse hitting theaters in May 2016, that will wrap the First Class trilogy. So perhaps that could open some characters to being on the TV show. We'll have to wait and see. As for X-Men films that will hit, Gambit will hit fall of 2016. Wolverine 3 will hit March 2017, and then again we have that mystery movie for 2018 and anything and beyond. But I at least would like to say that, yeah, maybe we should consider the ending of the First Class trilogy to at least allow some leeway for characters. But it really matters. Of course, the movies are going to be the bread and butter, and they're going to wag the dog if this is a shared universe. So it's still a lot of speculation over the next year and a half of what's going to happen here. But speculation's kind of the fun of it. But let's hope that crazy bullshit rumors aren't the norm like they have been for some other things lately.
Yeah, but I think it's got the potential to be really enjoyable if they nail down all the proper elements. If I didn't think about the whole end of the trilogy, so who knows if it will open up those characters to be used in other mediums. But I think that it's if any roster of characters as far as superheroes go from a particular part of a universe is going to open itself up and lend itself to a television show, it would definitely be the X-Men, because it's just such a, like you said, such a broad history and deep roster. I think that they could nail it down. There's been a couple other things that have happened recently, but one of them I wanted to talk about before we, or going into the next topic, was they had dropped the Fantastic Four trailer. Eric, you saw the teaser?
Yeah, I only watched it one time, I think, but I'll just say that, yes, it was a teaser, less than 2 minutes. They doesn't seem they have too many VFX shots to show off, but the movie comes out in August, so we'll probably get a full trailer within the next few months, more VFX shots, but it already has made some naysayers start to believe, because a lot of people were willing to write off the movie based on nasty rumors they'd heard or some changes. But we've said on this show that we're cautiously optimistic about it. We hope that Fox knocks it out of the park and has a box office win on their hands just so they can throw it in Marvel's face for dumping on the characters that launched the Marvel Universe. But it looks serious, but they said it's going to be a superhero that really focuses on family, because that's how they see the Fantastic Four. And I think that, just from what we've seen, the movie, it shows a lot of promise. That's what I'll say, and it is likely something I'll want to see in theaters.
Yeah, I will say I've seen it a couple times, and I was really impressed. I wasn't necessarily one of the naysayers because I am always cautiously optimistic and maybe even a little bit overly optimistic at times, depending on how much I love a character. Obviously, the more you love something, the more you want it to be great, and you want that particular product to be successful. So, you know, here's crossing my fingers for Star Wars 2016. But that being said, I think that when a lot of the development stuff started happening on the Fantastic Four, a lot of people made some, some obvious questions that were going to come out when they started doing things like naming the cast. They were extraordinarily young. You had, uh, a really young Reed Richards and Miles Teller.
They've said that this is more so influenced by Ultimate Fantastic Four as well. And I believe, I mean, I think you read Ultimate FF, but I didn't. Even though I do like Ultimate Marvel, I was more so an Ultimate X-Men fan and the Ultimates proper. But weren't the Ultimate Fantastic Four younger?
Yeah, they were a little bit younger, but they weren't. I mean, they weren't in their like what I would have to say at the oldest. Miles Teller is 30, and as is Kate Mara, Michael B. Jordan, and Jamie Bell. But that being said, it's even if they're not extremely young, Kate Mara looks really young. She looks like she could be 23 to 25. I don't know her exact age off the top of my head. I'm not going to look it up, but it was interesting. Some people blew their stack over obviously Kate Mara's character of Sue Storm and Johnny Storm and Michael B. Jordan. They're one's white, one's black, and how could they possibly be brother and sister? Well, no one's ever heard of adoption or I don't know, stepbrothers or something like that. But I think it was an interesting choice. But it's got people talking since they started developing the whole thing, and really, what has the most prone thing that people were saying was that it sounded like it was going to be horrible, and I had my own questions, but I will say that this put a lot of my fears to rest. One thing that was the most interesting to me is that when 20th Century Fox posted the teaser trailer on YouTube's page, in their description, which is made by 20th Century Fox, they have a little bit of a blurb about what the movie is going to be about. Obviously, it says it's contemporary reimagining, and then they nail it in there of Marvel's original and longest-running superhero team. They want to remind people that it's a Marvel product, and obviously the Marvel banner flashes when the trailer rolls, because that name recognition, even though it's a Fox product, really, that name recognition is going to get people seeing it. But the thing that interested me is that it's four young outsiders who teleport to an alternate and dangerous universe. And I think that that's interesting. It's not exactly a plot reveal significantly, but I do think it was a little bit of an interesting thing. Like Eric said, though, they haven't done a whole lot of the VFX. We saw a little bit of The Thing. We saw a little bit of Johnny Storm flame on and whatnot. I don't remember seeing Kate Mara going invisible or anything like that. And one of the best parts of the teaser, and therefore it being a teaser, literally teasing you, is that Miles Teller, you see him go to do Mr. Fantastic stretch arms, and they like cut away just as his arm, or it's like just off screen. And I was like, no, you just right before the right before the money shot, they pull away, and it was a little disappointing, but I will say it definitely made me want to see more. It made me want to see the next trailer. What did you think about the tone, Eric? I know you've said you've only seen it the one time, but how
Yeah,
did you feel about the tone?
it's framed a little more serious. I think it is going to have that charm of something that really gets that sense of family across. But I you know I like serious movies, and I think that's what this is going to be. I don't think it's going to be the cutesy jokes about their powers that the first two movies were, especially when you go back and watch Rise of the Silver Surfer, and it really didn't. It seemed like it didn't know what kind of movie it wanted to be. I think that this is going to be much more focused.
Yeah, I will say that yeah, the tone is a lot more serious. It has a voiceover at the beginning of the trailer. Just talking about general random typical movie stuff. Humanity needing heroes and this that and the other. It shows flashbacks of characters. Very cool sci-fi techie stuff and whatnot, but. The tone, it seems more serious. If I had to compare it to something, I would say it's a lot like the X-Men films. It seems in keeping with the more recent ones like Days of Future Past and X-Men First Class, in that it's got it's probably going to have those little flares of humor and whatnot, as is expected in most movies. Guardians of the Galaxy was not a hilarious nonstop romp. It used humor when I think that it should have, and granted, it was a little bit of more of an emphasis on humor because the characters are more humorous. This one is going to lend itself more to that serious aspect of an origin film, but it looks very impressive. I liked the cinematography, the look of it. A lot of people are calling it Chronicle 2, simply because I forget his name. Is it Trank? Josh Trank?
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh Trank, the director of Chronicle. But I will say that almost none of the cuts look extremely similar. Obviously, Chronicle, a lot of it being found footage film. But this looks interesting. At the end we kind of get a money shot of them all standing along in front of what appears to be some mysterious prism of light or something like that. But it looks to be what I think a lot of people wanted Fantastic Four to be the last time. It's like the preeminent superhero team of Marvel, and or at least the longest running superhero team, if not preeminent. I think Avengers have maybe taken that spot from the Fantastic Four, but the original superhero team. But Fantastic Four, it looks interesting. Check out the teaser if you haven't on YouTube, and let us know what you think. But that wraps it up for most of the topics we wanted to hit tonight, Eric. Anything else that you wanted to mention about the trailer? Obviously, like you said, you had limited viewing.
I'll just say before we move on to new comics, as usual with anything, the trailer silenced a lot of naysayers. Same thing which will probably happen with Batman versus Superman once we get a trailer for that. But yes, we'll go into new comics now since we're getting toward the end of the show. It's Wednesday, at least when we're recording this, New Comic Book Day, but I have not been to the shop yet, but I'll at least say what's on my pull list. Batman number 38, Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, continuing the Endgame storyline. Obviously, I can't discuss it too much, having not read it, but I've heard that there's going to be some more ambiguity about the Joker being an immortal, and Scott Snyder has said that he's going to leave it as ambiguous, but I'm not even sure I like the ambiguity of it. I would rather just have the Joker outright lie about it, because I think the Joker as an immortal is just a bad idea. He shouldn't be a supernatural entity. And then, see, Batman Eternal number 43 is also on my list. That apparently is supposed to bring us up to where Batman number 28 was. If you'll remember, that shipped in early 2014 and was kind of like a flash forward issue to show you where Eternal was going to go, and I guess now we're finally getting there chronologically in the weekly series, so I'm interested to see what that's going to be like. And then the Multiversity Guidebook, some people might pass it up because they don't think it's going to be an important read, and it does have a price tag of $7.99. But
Wowzers.
the thing is, it does have one or two multiversity stories in it, but a big point for me of why I want to read it, and maybe it should interest everyone else, is the fact that Grant Morrison has mapped out and he's telling us what all 52 Earths in the DC multiverse are like and what the heroes there are like. So if you've always wanted that map, well, we've seen the map to the multiverse, but it's the guidebook, and this will show you what all the Earths are, finally. And I think anyone who has questions should pick it up, and hey, Grant Morrison's the man. And no comic book reviews from me this week, at least not yet, but my review of the animated film Justice League Throne of Atlantis is now up at darkknightnews.com, so do go check that out. I know last week I said I would have one up, so it's there. I highly recommend the film. It's pretty cool, but I won't say much more, so do check out the review. Josh, what are you reading lately?
I've been actually catching up on some old issues of GL. I've been trying to catch up to so I can read the entirety of the Godhead series storyline, but unfortunately with all of the other tie-ins, I don't regularly read the other GL books. So I've been getting digital copies of those, and in the meantime catching up so I can get to that point in GL. I'm just not quite there yet. I think I mentioned last week, I want to say I collect regularly anywhere between 14 and 16 monthly books. So I have a pretty deep roster, and then I read a lot of digital stuff as well, now that that's become available. But on my poll this week, Aquaman 38, Batman 38 as well. And I will be picking up the Multiversity Guidebook, although a little bit pricey. But in particular, I'm really looking forward to next week, so I can finally read something that Eric has already had the luxury of reading.
Don't say it on the air.
I do not intend on saying it on the air, but yeah, there's a pretty cool book coming out next week that we are planning on picking up, and hopefully that will sate some of my some of my lust for that particular character. I've been waiting a while for it, as have other people, and that's all that I'll say. But
I read it a month ago.
I hate you so much. Anyway. So that's pretty much it for comics for me. I've also been reading some old Y the Last Man, just because I've been on my tablet nonstop and reading older comic books. But anything else, Eric, before we go, other than just letting the fans know where to go for the next episode?
Yeah, I'll pretty much wrap it up here. Again, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you've been here throughout season 1 or a part of it, and you'll join us in season 2 as hopefully the show gets bigger and better. And I guess here I'll start to get more detailed plugs of the other websites for all the latest Batman news throughout all media, movies, animation, TV, comics, merch. We cover it all. Head to darkknightnews.com for all the latest for the DC universe as a whole throughout all media. Go to dccomicsnews.com, our sister site, and then to get the backlog of our podcasts, and we'll still post future episodes there, as well as all the latest Archie and Dark Circle comics news and miscellaneous stuff. Head to our blog site, multiverseentertainment.wordpress.com, and be sure to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/a-podcast for all seasons. So that's going to do it for me. See you in season 2, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much. We always appreciate new listeners, and hopefully we'll hear from a lot of you soon, or rather you'll be hearing from us soon. And thanks for being with us for all of season 1, 34 episodes. Don't know if season 2 will be quite as many episodes. We might go on a yearly from this point on, but as always, Eric said already, check us out on Facebook, like our page, check out our YouTube channel as well, and thanks for being with us, guys. Have a good night.